Kuf Tes Amud Aleph, the number at the bottom of the page is 418. In yesterday's Shir, the Alter Rebbe explained the Pasuk, Al Yishalel Chacham B'Chachmasei, that the Chacham should not rejoice, should not be proud of his Chachma, but rather in the doing of Chesed. So the Rebbe explained that Al Yishalel Chacham B'Chachmasei means that the Chacham, the one who studies Torah, should not be pleased b'chachmasei with the fact that the Torah remains God's chachma. Because the idea is to bring chayis, to bring life from godliness into the world, and as long as the Torah remains God's Torah, in other words, it remains a little bit above the world, then it is not giving life to the world. But in order to bring the Torah down, that it should be able to give life to the world, you have to have the element of chesed. Because chesed is what comes down from the higher place to the lower place, like water. And in order to do that, in order to bring life to the world, you need the chesed to bring the hashpah, to bring the light and the life from God into the letters of speech, because it is the letters of speech with which God creates the world. As we learned earlier, that b'yud kei Hashem tzurei lomim, that with the two letters, Yud and Hey, of God's name, the first two letters of God's name, the world was created. The world to come with the Yud, and this world with the Hey. But in order to bring the Chayis down into the letters, there has to be the element of Chesed. And therefore, there has to be the act of Tzedakah. Tzedakah is an act of Chesed, and that brings Chesed above, and through the Chesed above, the Chayis comes down into the letters of God's speech, and that's what gives life to the world. Now in today's Shir, in the middle of the page, at the period, it begins with the word Ovazeh. Ovazeh Yuvon, and with this we'll understand, Mashakot Omar Harizal, Sheyesh Beis Mine Neshames B'Yisrael. What the Harizal said, that there are two kinds of Neshames among Jews. Nishmes Talmidei Chachamim. They are the souls of the Talmidei Chachamim who are Eiskim B'Teira Kol Yemeihem, not the average Talmid Chacham, but those Talmidei Chachamim who spend all their days and all their life in the study of Torah. And then there's all the rest. The Nishmes Bali Mitzvahs Eiskim B'Tzedakah Gemilos Chasadim. And then there are those Neshames who are Bali Mitzvahs, people who are devoted. Their function is to do mitzvahs, and particularly to give tzedakah and gemilas chasadim and so on. And here he doesn't say kol yemehem, because it could be that they learn also. So the difference is that there are those who learn all their life, and there are those who don't learn all their life. So the mitzvahs, and particularly tzedakah, is essential to them. The l'chayero. So what do we need to understand in the statement of the Arizal? Even the Talmud Chacham has to do mitzvahs and give tzedakah. As the Gemara says, that anyone who says, I will only study Torah, then even Torah won't be his. He won't even succeed in that. So he has to have tzedakah also, he has to have mitzvahs also. So what does it mean that there are those neshamas that study Torah and those that do mitzvahs? Every neshama has to do mitzvahs. Elo shehatalmidei chachamim sheteirasam iker v'reiv yemehem bo. But those talmidei chachamim whose study of Torah is primary, and that's what they spend most of their days. Umiyut yemehem b'gemilos chasadim, and only a small amount of time is spent in tzedakah and mitzvahs. The effect that their initiative below in the act of tzedakah, of chesed, their initiative which is meant to arouse a response from above, to arouse the divine chesed, in order to bring down godliness, which is clothed in chachma ilah, mokeh teiras Hashem, which is the origin, the source of the Torah, which they are studying, which is in their mouth, which they're verbalizing And this Torah needs to be brought down. The Mokir of Torah, the source of the Torah, needs to be brought down into this world so that it's giving life to the world. So through these Talmidei Chachamim, whose chesed is only some time, a little amount of time spent in chesed, therefore their chesed arouses a chesed that draws down the origin of Torah only to the souls as they are in the world of Bria. So it comes from the world of Atzilus into the world of Bria. Al Yidei Esek HaTalmud, through the study of the Gemara, Ulam Malochim Shebe Yitzira, and it comes down to the angels in the world of Yitzira, Al Yidei Limud HaMishnah, through the study of Mishnah. So through the study of Gemara, the godliness comes down to the world of Bria. Through the study of Mishnah, it comes down to Yitzira. Because the higher something is, the lower it can come. So because the Mishnah is higher than the Gemara, therefore the Mishnah can bring godliness down to the world of Yitzira, whereas the Gemara brings it only to the world of Bria. And even in the worlds themselves, the Gemara brings the godliness to the Neshamas of Bria, whereas the Mishnah brings not only to the world of Yitzira, but to the angels of the world of Yitzira. Yan hiyes chayis haneshamis v'hamalochim mishpoes mitzirufei eisies hadibur, since the life and the energy of the angels and the souls as they are in heaven comes from the combination of letters of speech, he Torah shebal peh, which is primarily the words of Torah, the oral Torah, and the origin of these letters is the Chachma Ilah, as we learned earlier, that the form of letters comes not from the breath. The form of the letter comes from higher than Seichel, Chachma Ilah. But in order to bring godliness from the breath, the divine breath, which is the second hay, the lower hay, to bring that into this world, this lowly world, shehu tzimtzum gadol b'yeser oz, which is a much greater tzimtzum than bringing godliness to the souls of Yitzira, but to the angels of Yitzira. For that is loy dai b'sarusa delatata shel talmidei chachamim, the arousal, the initiative of the talmidei chachamim, ha'eskim miyut yameim b'tzedakah gemilas chasadim, who spend a little amount of time in tzedakah and in gemilas chasadim. Their arousal and their initiative is not enough to bring godliness into the world. Ella yidei sarusa de bali mitzvahs, that comes only through the effort or through the initiative of the mitzvah doers, ha'eskim reiv yameim b'tzedakah gemilas chasadim, who spend most of their time with tzedakah. And that's why those who give tzedakah are called the supporters of Torah, that they support the Torah. V'hein b'chines u'madreges netzach v'heid l'hiyesan mamshichim eir ha'Torah l'mata l'olam ha'asiyah. Those who do the mitzvahs and give tzedakah are called the supporters of Torah, and they are also described as the attributes of netzach v'heid. Why? Because they bring the light of Torah down into the world of Asiyah, into the world of action. As the legs, which Netzach and Heid represent, as we learned earlier, that the legs represent the support behind the head and the heart. So the people who give tzedakah, that's what brings the Torah, which is the head, Chachma Ilah. That's what brings the Torah down into the world of action, as the legs carry the head where it needs to go. Give action to the head. Uvazeh yuvan, and with this we'll also understand Lama Nikra Tzedakah b'Shem Maisa, why tzedakah is called an act. Kameshikoser v'hoya Maisa Tzedakah sholim. Why is it called Maisa act al Shem Shepuloso Lahamshecher Hashem La'elam Ho'asiyah? Because the effect of tzedakah is that it brings godliness into the world of Asiyah, into the world of action. It brings the Torah, which the Talmud Chacham can bring down only to the worlds of Bria and Yetzirah. The mitzvah of tzedakah brings the godliness down to the world of Asiyah as well. Bezehu digdig loshen Zayar HaKadosh man de'ovid Shmo Kadisha. Going back now to the original Zohar, which the Alter Rebbe began at the beginning of the Eis of Siman Hey, to explain where the Zohar says that Avraham made a name for himself, and the Zohar makes a statement on that who is the one that makes a name, the name for God, for godliness? It's the one who gives tzedakah to the poor, to the unfortunate. I'm sorry, that David made a name on the pasuk Vayaz David Shem, that David made a name, and the Zohar explains that because David did tzedakah with the people, therefore he made for himself a name. And then the Zohar goes on to say, Shimon Omar, that who is it who makes a name for God, a holy name? The one who gives tzedakah to the poor every day. So now the Alter Rebbe explains that the Zohar uses the word man de ovid shmo kadisha, the one who makes a holy name, the ovid daika, and he uses necessarily the word the ovid ki v'sarusa delatato, because through the initiative below, b'tzedakah v'chesed tato, with tzedakah and kindness on the earthly level, on the human level, me'er chesed elyein, that's what causes the kindness above. So he is ovid, he makes the holy name, God's name, because God's kindness comes as a result of his kindness. Ki b'sarusa delatato b'tzedakah v'chesed tato me'er chesed elyein laham shecherin seif me'bechinas chachma ilah, to bring godliness down from the level of the divine chachma, which is Yud Shel Shem. This chachma ilah, which is represented by the Yud of God's name, is brought down lehei Shel Shem, to the Hey of God's name. The second Hey, b'chinas hadibur v'ruach piv yizborech, the letter Hey that represents the divine speech, kedei lahashpia le'elam ha'asiyah, so that the godliness reaches also the world of Asiyah. V'al derech moshel lahavdul havdalas ein kates, and as the example goes, only infinitely greater, k'mei she'adam einei medaber ela la'achidim, just as a person speaks only to others, and not when he is by himself. In the same way that God's divine speech means the revelation into the world of Asiyah, because above Asiyah, where there's God alone, there's no need for speech. And then when there are others, then when there are others, he condenses his thoughts and his seichel into the words that he speaks to the others, and those who are wise will understand. In Hayom Yom, for the 18th of Av, the Rebbe writes that the Mittler Rebbe says, in the name of the Alter Rebbe, that Avas Yisrael, the love for another Jew, has to penetrate into the very core of life itself. As it says, by the love concerning the love of God, v'ahavta Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavecha v'chol nafshecha. So the Medrash says, Ohavehu ad mitzui hanefesh, that you have to love God until the very last drop of your soul, down to the core of your soul. In the same way with Avas Yisrael, because Avas Yisrael has to be as profound and as deep and as real as Avas Hashem.